There's something captivating about a mysterious figure at the heart of a story. In this case, a woman whose actions and presence quietly unsettle the world around her. She doesn't shout for attention, yet everyone feels her impact. This story begins not with chaos, but with subtle tension, an unspoken question that lingers in the air. Who is she, and why does she carry such weight in the silence? That question pulls us in. We don't get answers immediately, and that's exactly what makes the journey so powerful. As the narrative unfolds, she walks through a town that seems ordinary on the surface, yet there's an undercurrent of something unusual. People glance over their shoulders. Conversations stop when she enters a room. It's not fear exactly. It's intrigue, a kind of awe wrapped in uncertainty. And here's where the language learning starts to happen, almost without us realizing it. Because while we're pulled into the mystery, we're also absorbing vocabulary tied to emotions, setting, reactions, words that carry more meaning because they're connected to real feeling and tension. What's most effective is how naturally everything flows. We're not just hearing words, we're experiencing them. Her presence challenges what we thought we understood about the people in this town. It makes us listen closely, not just to the story, but to the language itself. Each phrase becomes meaningful, each sentence carries emotion, and as the tension grows, so does our comprehension. We're following the plot, but also decoding tone, pace, and implication. This woman, though we know little about her at first, becomes our guide into deeper language awareness. Her mystery doesn't just entertain, it sharpens our focus. We start noticing how people speak when they're nervous or when they're hiding something. We pick up on hesitation, on subtext, on details we might have missed before. And as we follow her story, we're learning far more than just who she is. We're learning how to read between the lines, how to listen actively, and how to connect emotionally with language. It's not a textbook lesson. It's something you feel, and that's what makes it unforgettable. That's how a story begins to change how you listen, how you learn, and how you understand. What makes this story so effective for learning isn't just the mystery. It's how slowly and carefully everything is revealed. It doesn't rush to deliver answers. Instead, it gives us time to breathe, to notice the way people speak, to hear how everyday English sounds in a natural rhythm. That pace is what allows the language to settle in our minds. We aren't bombarded with complex ideas all at once. Each moment builds on the last, and with every new scene, we pick up something valuable without even realizing we're learning. This kind of slow unfolding is powerful because it mirrors how we learn language in real life. When we hear native speakers talk, we often miss the meaning behind quick or casual speech. But in this story, everything has space. The dialogue between characters, the narrator's description of places and emotions, they all flow with just enough time for us to understand them in full. And because the language is tied to real actions and emotions, it's easier to remember. A character might say something simple like, "I knew she wasn't telling the whole truth." And suddenly that expression becomes part of our vocabulary, not because we studied it, but because we felt it. Context does the teaching here. We don't need a dictionary to understand what's happening. We see the characters' reactions, we hear the tone of their voices, and we learn what phrases mean by watching how they're used. That's one of the strongest ways to build lasting language skills, through experience, not just instruction. And it's exactly what this story offers, a gradual, immersive experience that connects new words to real-world meaning. As we move deeper into the plot, our brain starts to predict language naturally. We hear a question and we begin to expect a certain kind of response. We notice how hesitation is expressed, how surprise sounds, how someone speaks when they're hiding something. All of these are powerful tools, not just for understanding English, but for using it with confidence. In the end, it's not just about what happens in the story. It's about how it happens, and how that slow, steady rhythm makes the language come alive for us. What keeps us leaning in moment after moment is how real everything feels. The dialogue in this story doesn't sound scripted or stiff. It sounds like people you might actually meet. Their conversations are filled with hesitation, emotion, pauses, even silences that speak louder than words. That realism makes all the difference. When we hear English spoken in such a natural way, we're not just learning vocabulary. We're absorbing tone, rhythm, and intention. And because it all fits so seamlessly into the story, it doesn't feel like studying. It feels like being there. The suspense is woven into the language itself. A character might glance at someone and say just one line, and suddenly the atmosphere changes. Maybe it's a warning, maybe it's a secret, but the way it's said keeps us alert. We start paying closer attention, not only to what's being said, but how it's being said. That kind of emotional engagement makes learning active instead of passive. We aren't just hearing English, we're reacting to it, feeling it, and remembering it. Each scene adds a new layer. Maybe there's a quiet confrontation, or a moment of doubt that shifts the story's direction. The suspense grows not from loud action, but from subtle tension. This is where real dialogue shines, because in those small, tense exchanges, we hear English as it's used in everyday life. We hear expressions of fear, suspicion, curiosity, all wrapped in natural, believable speech. These are the kinds of moments that stick with us and build our confidence in understanding real conversations. The immersive quality of the story means we stop thinking about grammar and start thinking about people. We follow their intentions, their motivations, their reactions, and because we're emotionally connected to what's happening, we retain the language more deeply. We begin to speak in those patterns ourselves, not because we memorized them, but because we lived them through the story. It's this combination of lifelike dialogue and slow, burning suspense that makes the experience so rich. It doesn't just teach, it captivates, and once we're fully drawn into the world of the story, learning becomes not a task, but something we want to keep doing. One of the reasons this story works so well for language learners is the level it's written at. Level 3 isn't too simple, and it's definitely not too advanced. It strikes a very thoughtful balance between challenge and clarity, just enough complexity to push us, but not so much that we get lost. That's where real growth happens. When we understand most of what we hear, but still have to stretch a little, we start to notice patterns. We notice how tenses shift when the mood changes, how questions are formed in more natural ways, how phrases fit together in ways that sound fluid, not forced. The vocabulary is chosen with intention. It isn't basic, but it's not full of rare or overly formal words either. We're introduced to expressions that are common in real conversation, words that people actually use when they're surprised, confused, or suspicious. And because we hear them used again and again in meaningful context, they stick. We begin to recognize not just the definitions, but the feeling behind each phrase. That kind of exposure is far more effective than memorization, because we're seeing the words in action. The grammar, too, is presented in a way that makes it feel natural. We hear present perfect used in moments of reflection. We hear conditionals when characters are thinking about what could happen. We hear questions, negations, embedded clauses, all of it wrapped inside believable, flowing speech. And because it's woven into the story instead of broken into exercises, we don't feel overwhelmed. We're learning without stepping outside the experience. It's this kind of structure, carefully designed but never obvious, that helps us build confidence. We're not just recognizing grammar forms, we're using them in our minds as we follow the dialogue, and slowly they start becoming part of our own thinking. When that happens, we're not just learning English, we're beginning to own it. This is the kind of language environment that leads to real, lasting improvement. One where the level is right, the challenge is there, and the story gives us all the support we need to keep moving forward. One of the most powerful elements in this story is the way it's told. The narration isn't rushed, it takes its time, allowing each moment to settle. That pace is intentional. It creates room for us to process what we're hearing, to connect the language with the images forming in our minds. Instead of racing through the plot, the storyteller leads us step by step, giving every scene the space it needs. That's how comprehension grows, when we're not just hearing words, but really understanding what they mean and how they come together to build something vivid and meaningful. The descriptions in the story are especially effective. They don't overwhelm us with detail, but they paint just enough of a picture to draw us in. We can imagine the setting clearly, a quiet street, a flickering light, the way someone glances over their shoulder. These images aren't just background. They help us make sense of the story and the language within it. Because when we visualize something as it's being described, we connect to the vocabulary in a much deeper way. A word like hesitant or uneasy doesn't just become a definition. We feel it. We recognize it in the tone of voice, in the pause between sentences, in the way a character moves. This kind of careful storytelling also trains our ears. We start to notice sentence structures, transitions, and phrasing more naturally. We hear how a question leads to a pause, or how emphasis on certain words changes the meaning of a sentence. These are subtle things that often go unnoticed in fast, everyday speech. But in this story, every line is delivered with clarity and purpose, which helps us become more attuned to the sounds and rhythms of English. As the story builds, we begin to anticipate meaning. We predict what might come next, not only in the plot but in the language itself. That's when comprehension becomes more than passive listening. It becomes active engagement. We're no longer just following the story, we're inside it, thinking in English, feeling the suspense, and understanding the language with growing confidence. And it's that kind of immersive, well-paced experience that transforms how we listen and how we learn. What really keeps us listening all the way to the end are the deeper themes woven into the story: curiosity, courage, and discovery. These aren't just elements of the plot, they're feelings that echo through every scene and every sentence. From the very beginning, there's a sense that something is hidden, something waiting to be uncovered. That curiosity pulls us forward. We want to know more, not just about the mysterious woman, but about the people around her, the choices they make, and what lies beneath the surface of their ordinary lives. As we listen, we see characters pushed out of their comfort zones. They take risks, ask questions they're afraid to hear the answers to, and explore parts of their world they once ignored. This is where courage enters the story, not as a dramatic moment of heroism, but as quiet decisions that build slowly over time. That kind of courage feels real. It reminds us that learning, like storytelling, often involves stepping into the unknown. Every time we choose to keep listening, to keep trying to understand, we're exercising that same kind of bravery. And then there's discovery, not just about the mystery, but about language itself. As we follow the story, we begin to uncover how English works in everyday situations. We discover new phrases, ways to express emotion, ways to ask difficult questions. We learn not just what people say, but why they say it. It's the kind of learning that happens naturally, almost invisibly, because we're so engaged in what's unfolding. Each moment of the story offers something new, whether it's a clue to the mystery or a phrase we didn't understand before but suddenly recognize in context. These themes are powerful because they speak to something universal. No matter where we're from, we all respond to the desire to know more, to understand people better, and to find meaning in the journey. That's what makes the story more than just a tool for language. It becomes something we connect to on a deeper level, something that keeps us focused, motivated, and eager to hear what happens next. And when learning feels like that, like an adventure we're part of, it's no longer just about reaching the end. It's about the experience we carry with us long after the story is over. Thank you for joining this journey where language meets emotion, mystery, and meaning. Every word, every scene, and every moment was a step toward deeper understanding and confident learning. Keep listening, stay curious, and let the next story take you even further.